Assalamu alaikum everybody. I hope you guys are doing well. So Walaikum assalam. We are basically going to be discussing the case study that you guys had attempted. Obviously now most of you are in A2, but a lot of you are also giving retakes, so better we discuss the case studies and we discuss the mistakes that most of you guys had made, right? So that you guys exactly know how our case studies marked, and you guys know that what is the criteria, that how do we mark case studies at CIE. This is important for you guys, so that you do not end up making the same mistakes in your retakes, let's say. And all those students who are actually giving their exams in October, November, be it for the first time or be it as a retake, it's important that you guys exactly know what the criteria is. So that is the agenda for this case study, and it's good to be back on YouTube. After a few days, after a few months, actually I think June, July, 2 months went by in checking, and I was sort of missing YouTube. So let's sort of begin. And before I begin, so basically this is the May-June 2025 paper 2 variant 2 case study, the South Africa case study that you can see that came in your exams. We're going to be discussing that. And before we start, if you guys have any questions that you want me to address, so please feel free to mention it in the comments. I'm going to be reading those comments so I can sort of just answer you directly. Okay. So, but since most of you have already had your scripts with you, and most of you have already seen those scripts, you guys must have noticed that in the case study question, the first two case study questions, either you guys scored a 0, even if you guys wrote something, and then especially the last two questions, most of you were scoring 1 out of 6 or 0 out of 6, or something around those lines. And there were concerns that were being raised by students. A lot of students were sharing me their scripts saying that we don't understand why we're getting so low marks. Well, today's I'm going to address all these concerns. I'm going to exactly teach you why were you not able to score, so that you first see how I am writing, and I'll tell you how exactly they're marking. Okay guys, are we good to go? Let me know in the comments, and let's begin. So I'll just quickly skim through the case study. The first paragraph is talking about South Africa's economic difficulties, and then it mentions the figure where the unemployment rate is constantly going up. And it also talks about the Gini coefficient being 0.67, and obviously it's high because anything above 0.5 is showing income inequality. It's also showing that there's income inequality in the country. Economic growth is very bad in Africa, and together with high government expenditures, so economic growth is really bad, and then the government expenses are very high, which means that you have a fiscal deficit, which is your budget deficit of more than 4% of GDP in recent years. And the South African currency has gone down. And despite the fact that South African's currency has gone down, the current account balance has not improved. That's what the case is saying. And it's further expected to deteriorate in 2024. And it also mentions that South Africa is also suffering from extended power cuts. Now, extended power cuts is electricity problem. And electricity problem is a structural consequence. So as a student, whenever I'm reading this case study, my mind should immediately connect with, this country is talking about, the case study is talking about these growth issues and, the current account deficit problem. At the same time, it's also mentioning that it doesn't really has electricity. The country doesn't have electricity, or it has electricity problem. So, first we need to solve the basics. If we have electricity, then only we can function as an economy. So we need to, and these are known as structural issues. So they're taking 10 hours a day. So we only have 24 hours a day, and like 50% of the time we don't have electricity. So it says what can be done. And in March 2023, the IMF recommended the South African government should adopt the following policies: improve infrastructure such as electricity supply, transport links, and by promoting more private sector investment and encouraging more competition with South Africa and free trade with the neighboring countries by reducing the protection that it has, and such as closer links with the African continental free trade area, right? And the free trade area is where these countries, they sort of agree amongst themselves that we'll not introduce, or we'll introduce very few or not any tariffs, and we'll reduce the trade protection to encourage free trade. To tackle the very high rates of unemployment and income inequality, a range of policies have been suggested, which includes setting the minimum wage at appropriate rates to encourage more people to go back to the workforce. And this should be done alongside the policies to strengthen employment protection, and in addition to other policies of improving education training and better support and promoting more entrepreneurship. Now, this paragraph is more connected with the last question. The first question was identify the overall change in the unemployment rate between January 2020. Now, you guys are there, right? You guys are listening. You guys are understanding. Just let me know in the comments so that I know that, the audience, whatever limited audience we have, they are present. Also, guys, share the stream link with all your friends who are either giving a retake in October, November, or giving a composite in May, June, and they want to find out what they did wrong in the case study that they ended up with a bad grade, or they ended up with very few marks in case studies, right? Okay, so got it. Now, right, so the first question says identify the overall change in the unemployment rate in South Africa between Jan 2020 and October 2022. Tisha says all good. Yes, thank you, Tisha. It says identify the overall change. Now, guys, see, you have to understand. So I'll tell you my marking experience, and in general, my marking experience is an experience that all other markers will share the same. That whenever so what we witnessed was that identify the overall change in unemployment rate, right? So here students were actually coming up with percentage changes. They were actually, what they did was that it's saying to January 2020, say from January 2020 to October 2022, they're asking you to compare the change, right? So what people did was that they took out 30.1 minus 32.7 and they calculated percentage change, which is incorrect. This is already percentage change, and they're not asking you to calculate percentage changes. Remember, in case studies, examiners do not care about figures. We want to know the nature of the change. What exactly is the nature of the change rather than the values. Values are not important, and this I had already mentioned this in my the case study lives that we were actually conducting before exams. So identify means only one line answer you have to give. Identify the overall change in unemployment rate, and the answer to this question was identify the overall change. So you can see that from Jan 2020, the unemployment rate is 30.1. In October 2022, it has gone up to 32.7%, right? So your answer should have been that the unemployment rate between January 2020 and October 2022 has increased. That is the end of story. That's it. It has gone up, it has increased, it rose, it has risen. These words were required. The nature of the change, right? So the answer should have been the unemployment rate increased overall between January 2020 and October 2022. Let's say even if you did end up mentioning the figures, you ended up saying that it went up from 30.1 to 32.7. Still, this would have been wrong. But the mark is not given you on the figure. If you see that the examiner if you see your scripts, the examiner might have put in a tick on against the word increased, right? Which is showing that this is the reason why, this is exactly where you're actually getting that mark on the nature of change. So what students were doing was that they were incorrectly calculating percentage changes, which wasn't required. Some wrote, some wrote that in, one more thing that I found out in a few scripts was that some of the students wrote that in 2020 it was 30.1 and in October 2022 it was 32.7. Now again, this is correct, but this is not showing that it has gone up. You have to write that it has increased. Mentioning the nature of the change is required. Otherwise, you will not get the marks. You will get a 0 mark even if you say that in 30.1 it was 2020, in 32.7 it was October. It was 32.7. You have to mention that it has gone up, right? So this was part A. Part 1, it was a 1 mark answer. 1 line answer had to be given. Okay, guys, everyone there understood, got it? Please share the live stream with your friends, with all your colleagues, your peers who are attempting a retake paper, who want to know why they lost marks, right? And who also feel that they might have been unfairly checked. So this live stream will clear a lot of confusions and misunderstandings that they have, that they feel they were unfairly marked while they were not unfairly marked. So this should end up a lot of confusions. Part 2 says, the second part of the question was saying, compare the trend in unemployment rate between Jan 2020 and Jan 2022 with that Jan 2022. So but this question is saying compare the unemployment trend. So see, unemployment trend from January 2020 all the way till January 2022. This is your first period, right? And your second period is the January 2022 all the way up till October 2022. This is your second period. So they are saying compare from the first period to the second period. And all you had to do was that you had, and I had taught this in my live streams, that what you need to do is that you need to see what is the unemployment in January 2022. It is 30.1. What is the unemployment in January 2022? It is 34.5. So has it gone up or gone down? 30.1 and 34.5. It has increased. So in the first period, the unemployment has increased. You don't need to mention the numbers. Okay, fine. If you do mention the numbers, that's fine. That's okay. But you just had to tell that it has increased. And in the second period, you can see that from Jan 2022, it was 34.5. It went down to 32.7. So it decreased in the second period. It went down. It fell. So decrease. So you will get marks on the word decrease, fallen, fell, it declined. These sort of words were actually giving you the marks. So the percentage was not important. What is actually happening to the unemployment rate would give you the marks. And this should be the length of the answer. All those students who were doing year by year analysis, when you were checking this attempt, when I was checking this attempt, students were writing things like, if you are doing month by month year, either to year, it's years given. If you are doing an year by year breakdown, that what, in Jan 2020 it was 30.1, then it suddenly fell, then again it rose, it peaked in July 2021, and then it again dipped to 32.7. 0 mark milega is pe aapko, 0 mark, no mark at all. ठीक है? So why? So you must be aware of what the criteria is. Okay. This is something that you must be aware as a student who's attempting a CI exam. You must be aware how a CI examiner grades your paper, because he's the one you need to prove yourself in the exam. So that's how it works. And people say that it's difficult to score marks in economics. Believe me, it's easy to score marks in economics if you know the criteria. Part B of the question was, Part B said, what is Part B? Part B said, identify one possible impact on firms in South Africa and one possible impact on the government of South Africa of such a high rate of unemployment. Now we know that South Africa is facing a high rate of unemployment, and the question was saying that what would be the impact. Guys, believe me, we were seeing literally students were writing so much. They're only asking you to talk about one impact in South Africa on the government and on the firm. So all you had to do was that you had to mention that the impact on the South Africa's firms. This is the length of a 4 mark answer. Ideally, depends upon the question as well, but this length would have scored you 4 on 4. And what you had to write was that you had to write that firms may face, obviously there's unemployment, right? Firms may face lower demand for their goods because of unemployment and services, as unemployed workers have less income. Now here you need to understand, just writing that demand for goods and services will fall is incomplete analysis. Now again, one more thing. Okay, so it's incomplete analysis. Remember that final framework workshop that I conducted when I talked about cause, effect, consequence. So you're saying that, I mean, there's lower demand for the goods and services, but then why is it? So you're mentioning that, okay, you know what? Because unemployed workers have less income. Alternatively, so a lot of students, you need to understand that firms may have a both positive and negative impact both. So yes, firms may face a lower demand for their goods because of lower incomes, which might be bad for them. But then the fact that, remember in AS economics, when you were studying, when in the chapter, you guys must have been taught by your teachers that when workers are unemployed, I mean, the fact that in a recession, wages sort of go down, and that's another reason why economy self-adjusts. So the fact that because there's surplus labor just roaming around, so they're ready to work at lower wages. So that's why, firms find it easier and cheaper to hire workers. So that's a good thing for firms. At the same time, for the government may face less tax revenues while having to increase welfare and unemployment benefits. Some students were writing that governments will face less tax revenues. It might result in a budget deficit. That was also marked correct to them. Okay, so that is all what you had to write. In case studies, you need to write short, to the point, specific information. That is all. Got it, guys? Are we all clear? Are you understanding up till now? Is this clear up till now? All good? So part B, everyone, part B of the question this was all you had to write. In part C of the question, which says, part C of the question says, consider whether continued fall in the South African currency may lead to a reduction in the current account of the balance of payment, right? So now we basically know that a depreciation of the currency could have an improvement in the current account deficit. We know that, right? So the point over here is that we know a depreciation could improve a current account balance, right? But the question is saying, consider whether. See, now you have to understand that in an AS economics, in the last 3 questions involve evaluation. And whenever they say consider whether, assess whether, there is always going to be evaluation and a conclusion that would be required. Always going to be. But in order to score marks in evaluation or a conclusion, the analysis has to be accurate. As in, if you're not doing the analysis right, then under evaluation, you will never be able to score marks in evaluation. And you can see that most of the students were losing marks, especially in 12 markers in section B and C. They were getting 0 out of 4 in evaluation. Why? Because either the evaluation was incorrect or the analysis was not done proper. And we'll also solve section B and C if you guys want me to. But consider whether continued fall. So isme, remember that consider whether or assess whether, 4 mark assess whether or consider whether questions involve 3 marks are for analysis, 1 mark is for your evaluation followed by a conclusion, right? So consider whether the continued fall may lead to a reduction in the current account deficit. Now, we were also witnessing some students writing the definition of current account or the definition of a why are current account deficit caused, or what is a depreciation. And what we had to do was that we wrote scene against it. Scene means that we have read what you're saying. I'll tell you what scene means. Scene means we have read what you're saying, but it's not worthy of a mark. In your economic scripts, if you're seeing the word scene, it's written like this. It means that we have read what you're writing here. We have seen this, but it is not worthy of a mark. Either it is irrelevant or it is not required, or it is not related to the question. So in case studies, there is point-based marking. Point-based marking means that you are marked as per the exact point that you're writing. So even if, let's say, you write wrong, but some of what you're writing right is correct, then you will be given marks. So you won't be negatively marked for the wrong, but you will be given marks for the right. But this doesn't happen in level-based marking questions, that is 12 markers. And if I saw, and I do plan to, depends upon how much you guys want me to, and if you guys want me to, then I will do it. So you can subsequently share the stream with your friends and all, and if they'll ask me to do it, then I'll do it. So section B and section C, 12 markers, level-based marking, I'll explain that. So point-based marking is all about, you're given a mark for that particular point. Even if you're writing irrelevant, that is not negatively marked, but for the right marks, you will get the point. So what you had to do was direct. In case studies, you start directly. A depreciation of the rand makes South African exports cheaper in foreign currency and imports expensive in rand. This is what it will do, and this should increase obviously when your exports will become cheaper because the price of exports will go down and imports will become expensive. But exports become cheaper in foreign currency, imports become expensive in domestic currency, that is the rand, and this will increase the demand for exports and reduce the demand for imports, improving net exports and hence reducing current account deficit. So again, the chain of analysis, cause, effect, consequence. The cause is the depreciation. The effect is that exports cheaper, imports expensive, causing increase in demand for this. Again, consequences, reducing current account deficit. This is how it had to be done. But then, like I said, that 1 mark is for evaluation. So under evaluation, what you needed to write was that the extent of the fact that the extent of a fall in current account deficit would depend upon the price elasticity of demand for exports and imports, or even it would depend upon the domestic capacity. So even if your currency is being depreciated, but that doesn't mean that your current account would improve because of the fact that you don't really have the capacity to cater to exports. So it depends upon, number one, the PD for exports and imports. It depends upon the domestic capacity. So if firms cannot expand output, because if they don't have the domestic capacity and firms cannot expand output, export growth may be limited. This is evaluation, followed by a conclusion. So for this, you had 3 marks. For this part of, you had 1 mark. To conclude, a weaker rand may reduce the deficit only if the demand is sufficiently elastic and supply can respond effectively. So the question was consider whether, even if they were asking about assess whether, you had to follow the same pattern for 4 marks, 3 mark analysis, 1 mark evaluation, whether continued fall in. Now here, remember this. Let's say that the analysis is very much improperly done or incorrect. Let's say it is incorrect. You didn't really explain it, and probably the only mark that you got was 1 in analysis because you just wrote that it will make exports cheaper and imports expensive, and that's it. You didn't really explain. So you might get a mark. But in evaluation, you wrote that the extent depends upon the PD, because this is a rote-learned line that usually a student and you will get a 0 mark if the analysis is not proper. So if you didn't really end up explaining how would a fall in the value of rand lead to a reduction in the current account deficit, and you're writing, it would depend upon the PD, you will not get a mark for that. You will not get a mark for evaluation. You will not get a mark for the conclusion you end up writing subsequent to that, saying that yes, it could help improve a current account deficit, but the extent will depend upon the PD if your analysis is incomplete, right? If the analysis is incomplete. And that is why students are also like, we wrote the right evaluation, which is in the marking scheme. I don't know why we are given a 0. The examiner must have done something wrong. We're going for a recheck. Well, there's no point, right? Then again, the next question, assess the extent to which closer membership with South Africa's free trade association may help South Africa achieve the growth needed to escape from its economic difficulties. Now, guys, remember, assess the extent. So you first of all, are you guys there? Are you guys sort of following and understanding what is happening at the moment? Could you sort of give me a thumbs up or something? So basically what you had to do was that for this question, you need to understand that when South Africa becomes a member, then there could be both advantages and disadvantages, right? So let's say that you were writing all the positive consequences that South Africa might be having, right? But then you're also required to come up with the negative consequence. So if you're writing the positive consequences, then 1 mark for negative consequence and 2 marks for evaluation. So how this works is, I'll tell you. See, for a 6-mark question, 4 marks are for analysis and 2 marks are for evaluation. That also includes a conclusion. Now, one thing you have to understand is that drawbacks or limitations in paper 2, not in paper 4, in paper 2 are part of your analysis. For example, if you're just giving if you're giving a drawback to something or a limitation to something, that's part of your analysis. So if you're saying that South Africa would benefit because of this free trade agreement, but then there would be some problems associated with it, so that would be part of analysis. The disadvantages are part of analysis, not evaluation in ALevelEconomics, paper 2. So even if you ended up writing all the benefits that South Africa could have, even if you ended up writing all the benefits that South Africa could achieve, you would end up with 3 marks on prose. But now listen to me. Since you did not give the limitations and you wrote the evaluation, you will not get any mark for evaluation. Why? Because of incomplete analysis, not because you didn't write. See, it's not necessary that you come up with 3 prose. No, let's say even if you come up with 2 prose, but still 1 con has to be given. Only then evaluation marks would be given. What is evaluation? Evaluation is that you weigh up the pros and cons and you say it depends on, and then you form a judgment. Ultimately, that would end on a judgment, right? You say it would depend upon these factors. So for instance, whether unemployment is good or bad, you in analysis, you write the good points, the bad points, and then in the end, you say it depends upon certain factors, the extent depends upon, and then you end up with a judgment. So that is a whole unemployment boxes that you're ticking. Evaluation boxes that you're ticking. But since you're not writing the disadvantage, you will not get the marks for evaluation. And a lot of students were like that, why are we only getting 2 mark out of 6 here when we have written so many advantages, and then we also wrote a conclusion, we were also writing evaluation, so why are we only getting 2 out of 6 or 3 out of 6? Well, that's because you did not get any marks for evaluation because you did not write the limitations. So are you guys understanding this or not? So what you had to do was that you had to, are you guys listening or not, guys? So what you had to do was that I've written the answer so that you can just, we'll quickly run through it. That closer membership of the trade agreement may help South Africa to achieve the needed growth, to escape economic difficulties, as it may allow. Now let's say I'm an examiner right now, and I'm going to tell you how exactly is the point-based marking going to be done. And honestly, this is something that I have, and the marking thing we do teach in our classes and our sessions, but I'm also sort of telling you guys now that how is this done, so that you guys know, so that you don't end up screwing up the same mistake in retakes. And if you guys really want me to do more live streams on YouTube for the AS retake sessions, then go and share this with your friends who are actually giving the retake and then they want to improve their grade, so that I can help them improve their grade. So share this with everyone so that maybe they're not watching it right now, but they will end up watching it later, right? Okay, guys. So the question was that whether it will allow. So you'll write that it will help South Africa improve its economic. So firstly, you had to identify what are the economic difficulties they have talked about. What economic difficulties have they talked about? They have talked about lower GDP growth, economic growth is very poor, unemployment is very high, and they've talked about the current account deficit problem. These are the three major, and plus they've also talked about income inequality as well. But income inequality question is later on being addressed in the below part. So what you had to talk about is that assess the so you need to talk about that how will it achieve the growth needed to escape from its economic difficulty. So you first need to know what sort of economic difficulty South Africa is having, and only then you will be able to write it. So, and now I will tell you exactly, if let's say I am an examiner and this is a script that I have. I want you to understand what I am saying. Let's say this is a script that I am an examiner right now. This is the script that I have in front of me, and I will tell you exactly how this point-based grading will be done. So obviously we have the marking scheme as well in front of us, but I exactly know the process because I was marking this attempt as well. So to escape economic difficulties, it may allow South Africa to tap into wider export markets, which could stimulate economic growth. I will give a tick here. A tick could be given over here as well, over here as well, over here as well, because it either in the first three lines, because this is 1 mark. So a tick is given here. ठीक है, अब ज़रूरी नहीं, it's not necessary that, oh, you know what, my checker gave a tick over here, so you know what, why has he ticked this when this is not even relevant? Now, I'll tell you what really sometimes happen is that since the marking is being done on digitally, sometimes the writing is not that understandable, so we have to zoom in the screen like this. And when we zoom in and we tick it, and by the way, the tick is not done with a pencil or a digital pen. There's automatically the annotation is given on the side, so we use that. And if we tick this like this, at times what happens is that we were trying to tick it over here, but it appears on the screen instead of over here, it appears on the screen at the top. So when the scripts are printed and sent to you, it's appearing at the top while you were trying to do it at the bottom. So probably you might not, and that is even not relevant for you. The annotations are not relevant for, to an extent it is if someone could explain what it means, but then what I'm going to say is that don't get into, you could just directly ask me on Instagram or WhatsApp what it means, but right, what I'm trying to say is this happens at times. So if you're seeing a tick that probably is being done on the wrong side and you're like, why? Then that's the reason. At times what happens is that when we zoom in the script and then we put a tick, so instead of coming at the top, it appears at the bottom, or at the bottom, it appears at the top. And this could happen. Okay? So I'm going to be putting a tick here. I'm going to be putting a tick here, which means that this is the 1 mark I'm giving. Then the second mark, such a membership would also lead to greater competition, forcing, this is it will lead to greater competition, forcing domestic firms to become more efficient and innovative. Obviously, because of free trade competition. This question is coming from International Trade Chapter, Advantages of Free Trade. Because South Africa is getting into a free trade agreement, right? The third mark would be given, lower trade barriers would encourage specialization, lower prices, and higher consumer choices. This is the third mark I am giving. The fourth mark of the analysis would be given on the disadvantages. So for a 6-mark question, either go for 3 pros and 1 mark is given for disadvantage, or if let's say you say that maybe it's more disadvantages for South Africa, so you could write 3 disadvantages and 1 advantage as well. But pros and cons, advantage, disadvantage have to be mentioned in the analysis. Right? Got it what I'm saying? So it could be either way. You could go for 3 pros, 1 con, or 3 cons, 1 pro. All these combined might, and then I've written that all these combined might stimulate GDP growth and reduced unemployment, also potentially reducing South Africa's current account deficits. So I've identified all the 3 economic problems that the case has mentioned and how it solves them. That, all of this above that I've mentioned, it stimulates growth, it reduces unemployment, and potentially reduces South Africa's current account deficit. But even if, let's say, I didn't write this, since it is point-based marking, I would have still scored the mark here, because the analysis of why is it beneficial is complete. So even if I hadn't written this, it's a point-based marking, I would have still scored the mark for that particular point. Now, let me be one thing very clear. Point-based marking, guys, listen. Point-based marking does not mean that you have to write in point. It means that you're given a mark for what point you're writing. But level-based marking is a more holistic analysis. It's a level-based marking where analysis is divided into 3 levels, level 1, 2, 3. And I'll come to that when I'm doing a live stream for section B and C. While evaluation is there are 3 levels for evaluation. 2 levels for evaluation. Either it's level 0, which is not a level, it's a 0, or it's level 1 or level 2. So that's more of a holistic sort of judgment. And here the score between an examiner could differ, but 2 mark tolerance is allowed by Cambridge. So it's not a problem that, let's say, and by the way, a lot of students are also like, you know what, we're going to give a recheck. We're going to give a recheck. Do you know what a recheck means? Now, so students and their teachers. Students and their teachers. You guys need to understand that when a student comes to you and says, please sir, recheck my answer, maybe I will get more marks. So usually probably you might do sort of some favoritism, or even if you're not doing any favoritism, but still you might probably out of sympathy, or you just want to make the kid happy, you might increase 1 or 2 marks when it's not really in their best interest. And it's very destructive. This is very destructive. So I request all the teachers to please not do that. If students come to you to please increase the marks, if the mark is not being increased, don't increase the marks. It has a negative impact on the kids in the long run. They end up thinking that this is how CI works, while it does not work like that. Also remember that when students ask teachers to please recheck their papers, the ultimate thought process of rechecking is that rechecking will increase marks. This is not correct. If let's say I recheck a paper and I am like, oh, you know what, instead of in section B 12 marker, 2 more marks should be given. But I'm rechecking the whole paper. So I'm like, oh, you know what, but in part A, I think 1 mark should be deducted. In case study part C, 1 mark should be deducted over there as well. He's given more marks over there. So ultimately what happens is that +2 in a section B is offset by -2 in the case study for different parts, or -2 in section C. And that's why 99% of the cases when students go for a recheck, the grade does not overall improves. Right? So don't think that a recheck means increasing marks just because, you know what, I come asking my school teacher to please recheck my paper and give me some fancy marks so that I can be happy. That's not how it works in Cambridge, right? Okay, because when the paper is rechecked, entire paper is rechecked as a blank script. The purpose of a recheck if I am checking a recheck paper, it's not that the objective is not to come up with or find ways where the student could be given more marks. The objective is to recheck the entire paper. Okay. However, now since I said that in analysis you have to give the limitation, however, domestic firms it's not necessary that a free trade agreement might benefit. There could be limitations. So you'd say that however, domestic firms may face stronger foreign competition, which may risk closures and unemployment, or it may slower economic growth. Obviously, because when firm unemployment would arise, it would also have an impact on GDP growth. And it may also have a subsequent impact on the current account position, because when firms would be closed, nothing would be produced and nothing would be exported as well. So it could worsen the current account position or slow down the progress that we thought is being made. So that's a limitation that you write. Now, once you have written the limitation, then you come up with the evaluation. And the evaluation is that now it's a 6-marker answer, and the evaluation here is embedded in the conclusion, just by the way. Okay? So the conclusion is embedded, the evaluation is embedded for the 6. It's a small case study. So probably you don't need a separate paragraph. For evaluation, you can embed this in the conclusion, and you say that to conclude, while membership with the free trade area can support growth by deepening trade ties, it can also worsen the economic difficulties. You're not going to get marks on this up till here, by offsetting some of the positive impacts. And then here's where you're actually building up that evaluation. The outcome would depend on the impact this membership would have on the domestic firms, as in how beneficial is the free trade agreement would depend upon the impact the membership would have on the domestic firms. and the South Africa's potential to boost output. So, I mean, it could be a positive. So, free competition could have a positive impact on firms. It could have a negative impact on firms. Whether it will have a positive impact or a negative impact, no one knows. Time tells. So, what you need to tell is that it would depend upon whether that impact is positive on the firms or negative. Plus, it also depends upon, does South Africa really have the potential to boost exports? You're saying that, okay, fine, we should encourage more exports and come up with a free trade area agreement where you reduce tariffs and you import from them and you export to them. But then do you have the potential to export? So it would depend upon this. And then you say that it's very important for the government of South Africa, in order to make sure that things are good and successful, it's important that we come up with structural reform. Now, why am I mentioning this structural reform? Because the case study is saying that South Africa is suffering from electricity problem. There's no electricity 10 hours a day. There's no electricity. So in economics we call this supply bottlenecks. Without addressing these supply bottlenecks, free trade alone will not resolve South Africa's difficulties, right? So this is a 6 marker that you can write. That's right. Now, again, part E, I did not get the time to finish this, but I'll do it right now. That assess the extent to which policies suggested to improve infrastructure and to reduce high rates of unemployment are likely to reduce income inequality. Again, for a question like this, because IMF has suggested certain policies, right? So the question is saying that whether it will, the benefits. So, what you need to talk about is that you need to talk about your analysis again is basically 4 marks, and your evaluation plus your conclusion is 2 marks. It means 1 mark for evaluation, 1 mark for conclusion. That makes a total of 6 marks. Now, analysis of 4 marks is broken down into 3 and 1, which is 3 for pro, 1 for cons, or it could be the other way around as well. It could be 3 for cons and 1 for pro as well, right? So assess the extent to which the policy suggested by improvement would reduce the high rates of unemployment. So you'll say that when such policies would sort of reduce income inequality, when those policies will not reduce inequality, and then 3 marks you can say when it will, and then 1 mark when it will not, followed by an evaluation or conclusion. So a few policies have been suggested in the case study. If you can go through it, that the case study suggests a few policies like, it suggests that just a second. Yeah, it suggests that more competition. It suggests about minimum wages to bring the minimum wages at appropriate rates to encourage people in the workforce, and to strengthen employment protection, and other policies like education and training. Obviously, these are all supply side measures, and to promote more entrepreneurship. So these are all supply side measures. Some are market based supply side policies. So let's sort of write an answer, and what we'll do is that we'll start off by saying assess the extent to which these suggested policies improve infrastructure and to reduce high rates of unemployment are likely to reduce income inequality. So you don't need to define income inequality. You don't need to talk about you don't need to tell that the Gini coefficient for South Africa is 0.67. You don't need to talk about all that. Just say somehow it would be mentioned embedded in the between, but the start shouldn't be in defining what income inequality is and how bad it could be a problem. Start directly by saying that the policies suggested, right, could so what should have been a good score for this paper? Prashant, a good score is anyway, see, if you have above 26, technically, let's say you have touched 30 or above, so that's decent. So you're safe. Plus, but depends upon, and if in P1, let's say you have around 26 and above, so you're safe. So 30 above, 26 above is good enough. And if you score somewhere around, let's say 39 to 40 in paper 4 now, and paper 3 let's say 27ish around, then you will get an A star overall. So because in AS you have 4 marks above in the P2 threshold, and in the threshold for P1 was what? I got 26 and 45. This is more than enough to get. But just make sure that the content for A2 is difficult and it becomes a lot, and because you need to write a lot in A2. And the writing also differs very differently from A2 and AS, and the marking criteria, the paper pattern differs. For instance, in AS, limitations are part of analysis, while in A2 they are not. And there's a lot of models that we are studying. I'm sure right now you must be studying the utility theory and the equi-margin principle and all of that. So it has to be, you need to make sure that A2, AS itself, the curriculum is, a lot of people don't find that hard, but they still end up not scoring. And that's the reason why they are ending up not scoring, is because of these reasons that I've mentioned. That's why you're not getting the scores, because either the analysis is incomplete, so you're writing incomplete analysis, you're also doing the evaluation, but then you're not getting any mark on evaluation, getting a 0. And that's why. Anyways, the policy suggested could, what's the question? Likely to reduce. The policy suggested could likely reduce inequality. Because, so you need to talk about, the IMF has talked about a few policies. So you need to talk about how those policies will reduce inequality. So you don't need to talk about the benefit of those policies. It has to be benefit of the policies that why it reduces income inequality. Specifically, if it's not addressed to why it reduces income inequality, you will not get marks for analysis. And if you will not get marks for analysis, then you will not get mark for evaluation either. So the policy suggested could reduce income inequality because you will talk about better infrastructure. That's what was suggested, right? Improve the infrastructure. But let's see how I will connect this. Because better infrastructure, they talked about improving transport and electricity, let's say. What it does is that it raises productivity. Now, in one of the scripts that I was checking, that's something I remember. Student was writing it will improve productivity and will cause GDP growth and will solve problems for South Africa. 0 mark. Why? He's writing correct, but he is not linking it with problem. How is it reducing income inequality? So, because that is what the question. If you have to answer the question, so either in such cases we will write TV too vague, or we will write not answered the question. Right? Raises productivity, and it could sort of connect poorer communities to job opportunities, right? Because the poor people will now have more job opportunity, will make them more employable, and connect. So this is 1 mark. I write this, I get a mark. Poor communities, right, to job opportunities, right? So this is, I get a mark here. I get 1 mark here, right? So I'm writing 3 advantages, right? So the second is also education and training improve, because when you're writing it, it connects job opportunity, it makes more job opportunities, so automatically you're telling that it will reduce income inequality. Also, education and training improves employability, right? It improves employability, allowing low income groups. You're targeting, because education and training is already taken by the rich, right? You're allowing low income groups to access higher wage jobs, right? And that is exactly why, this is your you can only write like this if you have good economic expressions in your head. So it's important that you read thoroughly. You just by superficially reading notes or something, probably students will not end up with good grades. You need to be You need to be revising a lot, learning a lot, right? To access, also education and training improves employability, allowing low income groups to access high wage jobs. So that's something that you can write. The third point that you can write is that you can talk about the minimum wage, right? So you can say a minimum wage, moreover, again, this is you write moreover, because that's the third point that you're mentioning. Moreover, minimum wage and employment protection. Minimum wage and employment protection can raise incomes, right? It can raise incomes of the lowest paid workers. Combined, these policies would help in reducing income inequality, right? But that's how you said that. How will it reduce? Because the question is assess the extent. Hamesha it says assess the extent, consider the extent. You have to write the pros and the cons, the advantages and disadvantages, whether it will happen or it will not happen. If it happens, why? If it doesn't, why? And then you go for evaluation and conclusion. And to score marks for evaluation and conclusion, your analysis has to have that either pros and cons, advantage, disadvantage, whether this will and whether this will not. Combine these policies would help in reducing income inequality. Now you talk about why income inequality will not reduce, and you say, however, the question was assess the extent to which the policies to improve infrastructure and to reduce high rates of unemployment likely to reduce income inequality. So then you say, however, you would say, however, policies may take time to deliver results, which is, we're talking about time lags, right? So benefits may not be immediate, and hence the inequality may not immediately reduce as we were trying to. So that's one limitation. So yeah, and expenditures on infrastructure, because we're doing expenditures on infrastructure, right? So expenditures on infrastructure. Now here is another thing that I noticed in the exam. I'll tell you, expenditure on infrastructure and education may result into cuts being made elsewhere, such as lower unemployment benefits, or lower medical and health related allowances, which may worsen the inequality, or offset the initial positive effects. See, now here what I wrote and what I saw was that when students were talking about it may result in cuts being made elsewhere, so students wrote that it may result in an opportunity cost, or they wrote about it may result in a budget deficit. See, even if it results in a budget deficit, you have to tell how will it not solve inequality. So if you're not saying that how will it not solve inequality, you're not going to get the marks. So a lot of students were trying to say that it will result into So that is why यही मैं आपसे मतलब literally the whole year I was screaming and screaming and screaming on my Instagram and YouTube lives that it's important that you learn how to write. Well, it's also important that you must be studying under the right guidance so that someone who is actually telling you that this is where you get marks, this is where you not get marks. So here, if you're actually saying that income inequality, I mean, you're saying that it would result in because this is a lot of students have made this mistake. They have written that infrastructure spending on education, it will result in a budget deficit, or they have written it will result in opportunity cost. You don't have to write a general disadvantage. You have to connect that disadvantage with the question. Otherwise, you will not get the mark. And because you did not connect it with the question, you also then end up screwing the evaluation marks as well. No mark for evaluation as well then. So the only mark that you'll get is a 3 on 6, while you'll be like, why am I getting 3 on 6? Well, I've written that there is an opportunity cost, it might result in a budget deficit, there might be time lags. Connect it with the question about income inequality. How will that not result in income inequality? Right? So what was the question? And then you write evaluation. This is the evaluation. While these policies have both, while these policies seem promising, you have to attempt the paper in English language, and I get comments saying, speak in Urdu. Dude, if I speak in Urdu, then you will never be able to write this language. And that is why you're not able to write an answer, because you are not able to form an English expression. While these policy, and I'm just being very blunt and honest that this is what I've come to realize. It's important that the information goes in your head in English language. While these policies seem promising and have, both positive and negative consequences on income inequality, the effect depends on, here we are doing the evaluation, the effect depends on how well these policies are designed and implemented. So here the evaluation and conclusion is in the same paragraph, is embedded in the same paragraph. So you could say, to conclude, I'll come to this. How well these policies are designed and implemented. And how well are they targeted, and whether they are sustained over time or not. If these policies are not sustained over time, you implement them in January, but then you let go of them in March, then no effect on income inequality. And whether they are sustained over time or not. Otherwise, benefits on income inequality. Again, the benefits on income inequality, not general benefits. On income inequality may be spread unevenly, leaving inequality. One more thing. Inequality largely unchanged. Now guys, listen. When you are writing a conclusion, you're forming a judgment. That judgment should have a direction. If the judgment does not have a direction and the judgment is just pretty vague, that when you read that, it doesn't really comes to a conclusion. Conclusion means you have to come to a final judgment. What are your final remarks now? What and the final remarks have to have a solution. It should in AS, we're not talking about A2 right now. It should have a solution oriented approach. Otherwise, that judgment will not be precise. It will just be a vague statement that you are making. So you will not get the marks then. This is the reason why students studying so hard, even pulling all-nighters, not focusing on how to write answers, are not able to get marks. This is the reason why a lot of students lost mark in case study, because they were not writing it like this. Even if they were right, I mean, I'm not saying that this has to be the exact language, right? This has to be I'm not saying that this is the only way to write. No. What I'm saying is that there could be some other conclusion as well, but it has to be along these lines. Right? Got it? And for those students who are not mentioning the limitations or the pros and the cons or the other side of the argument, they will not get the marks for evaluation and conclusion. And that is exactly the reason why you lost marks in section B and C. Now, what we have done with this case study, I want you to share this live stream as much as you can so that more and more people know about the channel, they subscribe to my channel, and at the same time, they understand what mistakes they made. This was a very good live stream especially for those who are going for retakes. So share with them. And if you guys want me to do more of such streams, then let me know in the comments, and you can get in touch with me on Instagram as well. So that's all for now, guys. I'll see you all around in my next live stream. Allah Hafiz and all the best. And remember, you can turn things around and you can make a very good comeback. You still have there's 31st of August today. You exactly have a month left. On 30th September is your paper 2 exam for October, November. These 30 months are very important. You can make a comeback, and together we'll make a comeback. Okay. So thank you so much for watching, and Allah Hafiz.